I'm speaking with Father Guy Nicholls. Father has agreed to give us an update on the John Henry Newman Sacred Music Institute.
Yes, it's the Institute of Liturgical Music. That's right, the JHNILM. Shall I go ahead?
Absolutely.
Very good indeed. Yes, we're just about to launch the introits of the Graduale Parvum for every Sunday in the year, and solemnities which can fall on Sundays and particular feast days as well, which also can take place of a Sunday. So mainly introits for all masses that anyone is ever likely to need at a Sunday celebration. And they are in parallel Latin and English format, using obviously the Latin text of the Graduale Romanum and the Missale Romanum, where sometimes they may differ or give alternatives, and the English of the Eisel Missal, with additional psalm verses, because obviously the chant of the introit is naturally rather less drawn out than that of the Graduale Romanum. So there needs therefore to be a compensation in terms of the length of the chant to fill the required ceremonial space. So there are extra psalm verses. We followed the Versus Psalmorum et Canticorum, which was recently republished by the CMAA. So use those, and then also use the English translation. The English translation, I should add, is that of the new Grail, the revised Grail, because that's the one that's now in standard use in the States, and we would certainly like to think that this would be of use in the States as well as back here in the United Kingdom.
Well, Father, may I ask, you say you're about to launch these?
Yes. On April the 21st, at Oscott College, which is the Birmingham Archdiocesan Seminary here in England, the Archbishop of Birmingham, who is actually one of the two principal patrons of the Institute, will attend the launch and will then celebrate sung Mass using the chants of the Graduale Parvum, as well as the chants of the Missal.
That's wonderful to hear, but am I correct that when I say that some of them have already been launched over the last few years? Is that correct?
Yes, it is true that you can access some of them online. Mm-hmm. Jeffrey Tucker published some quite a few years ago now, ad experimentum, and then subsequently on the JHNILM website, we also publish them week by week, individually, obviously, for the particular Sundays. But now we're at the stage where we can actually publish them as a printed book.
Well, it seems like I called you at just the right time.
Yes, I think there's a great providence in that, Jeff.
Well, it sounds like you should let us be the first ones to announce it when it comes out.
Yes.
No, I'm kidding. Although we'd be honored to do that.
No, I think I'd be very happy about that as well, Jeff. We have spoken about that in the past. I know you actually asked me to make some sort of statement for you about this, and of course I'm afraid that with the various things that I've got on, I just haven't been able to get around to doing it in that format, which is why, again, I'm glad that you've rung, because it means that we can do it in this way, so at least you do get the opportunity to put something out, and it would be good for it to be given some publicity at this stage, I think.
You must be very excited about this coming to fruition.
Very much so, yes, because as you know, it's been a long time in gestation.
Long is a relative word, though, right?
Yes, I think that's probably true. But I should also add, straight away that, of course, this is really just the first step, really, the first step in a much longer project, which I hope to be able to continue with. I've already gone some way towards it, of completing all of the chants of the proper of Sunday masses and solemnities throughout the year. So my next stage, which I would like to achieve fairly soon, if I can, is the communion verses. I'm already about halfway through those, though I've had to take a bit of a break while I do work in my seminary teaching, which I've now taken on a couple of courses at the Diocesan Seminary. So I have to do quite a lot of extra work on that. But I do want to get back to working on the communion antiphons and psalm verses. And then after that, I obviously need to work also on the offertories and the graduals and the hallelujahs.
Well, Father, I'm calling from Los Angeles, and you are in England.
Yes.
And while I have you on the line, I would like to ask you about something that I was a little bit confused of on the website.
Oh, yes.
At the present time, is there a place that people can come and work with the Institute? And if that is true, which types of people do you feel should come and work with the Blessed John Henry Newman Institute of Sacred Music?
Yes. Well, as things stand at the moment, of course, although we do have a sedes, a seat, at the Oratory in Birmingham, it's not really yet the case that we are able to operate as a full-scale academic institute. It will take some time, I think, before we're able to assemble the kind of faculty and facilities that would enable us to do something as ambitious as that. So at the present time, I'm just hoping that my main contribution can continue to be the provision of Gregorian chants for the celebration of the liturgy in smaller parishes and congregations, in line with what the Second Vatican Council Fathers asked for when they hoped that simpler editions of chants would be prepared to enable congregations to participate in the singing of the mass chants.
Well, about a decade ago, Corpus Christi Watershed was involved with some videos from Birmingham.
I remember that.
In terms of Cardinal Newman's house.
Yes.
Which I believe do you still live in Cardinal Newman's house, or that was only back then?
Well, I'm not actually living in the house at the moment. I'm still a priest of the Oratory, but for various reasons, principally in order to look after my elderly mother, I'm now actually living out of the house. So I just go back and visit the Oratory fairly frequently. I'll be there tomorrow, for instance.
Well, I remember well the polyphony that was sung at that time.
Oh, yes.
Was very beautiful. The voices were not harsh. It was very musical and very well done. And I'm just wondering, are those same people from 10 years ago, 8 years ago, going to be involved in this institute as well?
Well, the main, of course, those who sing in the principal high mass on Sundays do use the Graduale Romanum. So they don't need the chants of the Graduale Parvum.
Well, in terms of teaching others, though.
Ah, yes. Well, that's another matter. And I don't think that there's any need at the moment for them to become involved in that. Apart from anything else, they would probably need to be paid a lot more than I think most people will be able to afford. So I think that in the foreseeable future, much of that work will probably fall on my shoulders and one or two others that I can probably find and identify to help me.
Wonderful.
But the provost of the Oratory, Father Ignatius Harrison, is certainly very keen to make use of the Graduale Parvum chants at the other Sunday Masses. So obviously those which up until now either have had no musical settings at them or else have had something else, like, for instance, the standard replacement hymn, which has been, of course, a feature of most of our liturgies for many years on both sides of the Atlantic, I think. So he wants to replace the hymns with the proper chants eventually at least one of the other Sunday Masses, if not more.
I have a question about how familiar you are with Westminster Cathedral.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was looking through their programs that they print online.
Oh, yes.
Every single day of the week, they have a different mass by a different composer.
Yes.
I'm looking on Monday, they have one by Guerrero. On Tuesday, they have one by Palestrina. On Thursday, Clemens non Papa. Then on Friday, Victoria. These are all full-length, different masses that they do every day of the week. And
yes, that's
I'm just
right.
wondering, have you heard them sing? Have they had an influence on what you're doing, or how does that all work?
Well, I certainly do know them and have heard them many times. And the director of music is a great friend of mine as well. So I do have contacts with them, not always very frequently, because obviously they don't move frequently out of London, and I don't frequently go down to London. But nonetheless, we do have opportunities to meet up. Recently, in fact, very excuse me. Very appropriately, we were invited, Westminster Cathedral with Martin Baker, and I were invited by the famous Scottish composer, Catholic composer, James Macmillan, of whom you may have heard.
Yes.
To go to Scotland, where he organizes a music festival every year in his birthplace. And the climax of this festival is always a celebration of the Mass, and it's always a sung Mass. So he asked me to go and be the celebrant so that it could be sung throughout, and he asked Westminster Cathedral Choir to go and sing the ordinary and some of the motets. So it was a very wonderful occasion. So that's my most recent opportunity to sing with the Westminster Cathedral Choir. It was last October.
Because I have to say, I mean, even just to put together the list of repertoire, any little thing that I was doing, it's enough to depress me when I see what I know. And that's just putting together the list, much less training them in all of these different pieces you have people like Grieg and Mendelssohn, Lassus. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Vierne. And so, but I think you may have mentioned to me, in reality, though, that really does not represent what happens at most parishes in England.
Oh, well, indeed, yes, you're quite right, Jeff. I have often to make this point with some firmness, really, to my American friends, because sadly, it's not like that. London is rather extraordinary. By all standards of comparison. There is no city in the whole of the Catholic world that has anything like London's liturgical provisions, because Westminster Cathedral is not the only church that has a fine liturgy. Of course, it's by far the most important, needless to say, as it should be. But then there are other fine musical traditions. The London Oratory, of course, has its own extremely fine musical tradition, and indeed has more than one choir. It has an extremely good schola from its secondary school. Mm-hmm. Magnificent. I was with them in January in Oxford, and they sang for a conference that I was taking part in, and they were indeed absolutely magnificent. And they again are not the only other important choir or important church in London with a choir. There are at least half a dozen others. And indeed, churches which celebrate Mass in Latin in the New Rite and some also in the Old.
Hmm.
So there's a tremendous variety of provision of a very, very high standard. But outside London, in the rest of the United Kingdom, there's hardly anything at all. The oratories are just little tiny plants in what is mostly a fairly great wilderness liturgically, of course, musically speaking. And that's true, of course, throughout Europe as well, except Germany, I think, probably has got still some very fine liturgical music. But Germany has its own difficulties, I think, of another kind.
Well, Father, you mentioned the exquisite quality of the London scene.
Yes.
And I wanted to share with you, in another project that I'm working on with some people, we have discovered some amazing primers from the 17th century and the 16th century that were being produced for England, even after the time of, obviously, Henry VIII and so forth. And
Yes.
I was wondering, have you had an opportunity to look through any of those? Because they have quite remarkable translations of the breviary hymns at a time when...
Oh, really?
At a time when the Catholic faith had really been banished, at least temporarily, from England. And what's remarkable is some of these vernacular translations
Yes.
were done the moment that the new hymns came off the presses. In other words, Pope Urban, as soon as they were revised,
Yes.
they were already translated into English, which I certainly never realized. But another priest was telling me, in fact, because of this, these were printed on the continent, and they were sent or shipped
Yes.
or smuggled into England. And in fact, that was a sign of their unity with Rome to use those, I think, what we both consider corrupted versions of the hymns.
Yes.
But as a reminder that they are with Rome. And I find it remarkable that literally the instant these came off the presses, they were translated into a rhyming, metrical, metered English. So you've not spent that much time with those translations.
I certainly haven't come across them at all. No. I don't know whether they were still generally known well in later ages in England. When the breviary was once again being translated into English by the Tractarians in the 1830s, most of the work on the translation of the hymns was done by Newman himself. And as far as I'm aware, he didn't know of any other existing translations of the breviary hymns.
Well, and of course the language, I'll have to send you some of them because the language is absolutely, I mean, this is being done in 1599, 1607, 1617, and it's not what I'm used to reading, obviously for obvious reasons. But I would say I believe that some of these people were aware of these translations because you can tell by the rhymes they choose and so forth. There was almost a tradition. The other argument is that it wasn't an influence. They just happened to be the same rhymes chosen and so forth because there's only so many ways that you can get across the point with some of these hymns. But I'll have to send you some and see what you think about these.
Yes, I would definitely like to see those. That would be very interesting indeed.
Because of some of the language, they couldn't be used in the year 2018. They're just not what we are used to for church vocabulary, if you will.
No, it would be extremely unusual if that were the case, I must admit, knowing these things.
Well, you kind of already answered this, but I was just going to ask what your current research is, and it sounds like most of your current research is the introits in the vernacular. Is that correct?
Oh, well, actually, Latin and English. I have been doing the GP chants right from the outset have been in parallel, Latin and English. And I've usually been quite deliberate in my choice of the same Gregorian melody for both languages. Again, that's been quite deliberate on my part, because the principle that I want to try and espouse is that the transition from English to Latin should be as painless and obvious as possible.
Absolutely.
And if they're already used to the chant in the vernacular language, they only have to look across the other side of the page and see exactly the same chant. Obviously, of course, with the subtle differences that you have to expect in the different kind of accentuation, etc., in Latin, but nonetheless, basically the same chant on the opposite side of the page, so that people have every opportunity to say, oh, well, we've done that in English, let's try doing it in Latin next time.
Absolutely.
So it's an encouragement.
I can only imagine the painstaking trouble. It's very hard. People don't realize this, but it's very hard to get those to line up across the page like you've done.
Yes.
And
yes.
Sometimes you spend hours and hours on it, and you wonder if people will even realize what you've done.
Well, yes, you're right there, Jeff. And of course, that's really one of the reasons why it has taken such an extraordinarily long time. Because in many ways, the basic setting of the text to the chants was something that I'd more or less completed about 3 years ago. Certainly while I was still otherwise engaged on my doctoral thesis, but in fact, I'd managed to do all that. And then, since that time, an enormous amount of effort has gone into just getting them properly set electronically, and making sure that no errors have crept in or have just been allowed to stay there.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing, even right up until the very last fortnight, we still, myself and various friends who've been working with me on this, have managed to identify places where there were still corrections that needed to be made. It just shows you how very difficult it is to eliminate errors in these things. If
I'm not wrong, you, in addition to the music things, you also did a considerable amount of research on Cardinal Newman himself. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely right. Yes. Yeah, my doctoral thesis was on Cardinal Newman's beauty, the idea of beauty, and not only with reference to liturgy, I must admit, but nonetheless, liturgical considerations were quite important as well. Yes.
The more I delve into that area, Newman's visage seems to hover over the whole period. I mean, you look at all of the people. The Anglican priests who became Catholic, whether it was Orby Shipley, I mean, obviously Ronald Knox later, but earlier on there were so many Anglican priests who became Catholic at the time. Will we be able to see any of this research that you've done?
Well, yes, actually, Jeff, I have to again to hold up my hands and admit that this is something that I should most definitely be getting on with, and have so far been prevented by the sheer volume and complexity of things that I've had to do. I haven't actually been able to do what I fully intended to do, which is to prepare my thesis for publication. Though certainly that is very much wanted. My supervisor and my examiners all were very keen indeed that it should be published. So I've got to do a little bit of work as soon as I get an opportunity. I hope that will come this summer when I've finished a course that I'm teaching at the moment at the seminary on the Eucharist. When I've run through that once at the end of this academic year, then I hope that over the summer I might be able to turn at last to revising the thesis for publication, but it will just depend, I think, on how much I'm able to concentrate on the matter in hand when the time comes.
Father, is it correct that you can't really understand Newman without studying about the Anglican Church?
Oh, yes. You've got to know that he was an Anglican in upbringing, of course, and you've got to know about how it actually worked for him before he became a Catholic. And it does, obviously, to a certain extent, shape some of his thinking, but it's amazing, really, how very much he put all that behind him when he became a Catholic. And of course, it was his study of the Fathers, particularly, made that possible for him. It was that enabled him to transfer not just emotionally, but culturally into the Catholic milieu as well. So you find that he's not, after his conversion, he's not particularly Anglican-minded, so to speak, if one can put it that way. He's very much carrying through the whole Catholic project.
Well, when these people, I mean, this was their livelihood as well. If they converted, that was the way that they had supported themselves, correct?
Yes, certainly.
I don't know that people necessarily remember that, but it's if you're converting, then your livelihood, your way of supporting yourself is now gone. So.
Yes, that's right. Yes, and of course it did make a significant difference to him and to many of his friends when they ceased to be a beneficed clergyman. But then some of them did also have private means, and they were able to use those to support themselves and Newman and other friends like him when they became Catholic. So they weren't left destitute. Where some people, of course, have been more or less made destitute as a result of becoming Catholics. One of the reasons why the Converts Aid Society was set up.
It's quite a story with the way that he was put on trial for, was it calumny?
Yes, indeed, the famous Achilles trial. Yes, indeed.
I just, like I say, I'm looking forward to whenever you're able to release the fruits of your labor on that. I think it'll be great.
Yes, there isn't very much in there about the Achilles trial, I'm afraid to say, because obviously there's not much about Newman's aesthetics in there, but there's plenty more besides. There's a great deal that certainly hasn't been seen before. That's the great advantage of it, really. It's an aspect of the Cardinal that just hasn't ever been dealt with in any great depth. Anyway, just a few odd references every now and again, and a few articles, but nothing at all systematic.
Well, and look, maybe I'm just a little bit slow, but I mean, we did those movies 10 years ago, and yet I'm just now beginning to really get a hold on his life and his relationship to Pius IX and all of those different things. I mean, I think it's not easily summarized. No.
I think that, of course, is a very good point. You can't oversimplify Newman without losing a lot of his subtleties. Where anything you say about him, you've got always, in a sense, to counterbalance with some corrective view.
Well, even his thoughts about Gregorian chant.
Well, exactly. That's a very good example, because one of the things that is generally known, certainly much publicized, is a rather negative view that he took towards chant. But in fact, that has to be seen not only in the context of what the chant was like in his day, which of course is quite different from what we are blessed with, but also that he did actually appreciate quite a lot of aspects of the chant as it was used in the divine office. So, for instance, one thing that isn't very well known is that he had a huge love of the tonus peregrinus from Sunday Vespers, the in exitu. And indeed, he used to get quite upset, we're told, in Eastertide, because for so many weeks along, you just get Psalm Tone 7 for all the songs on Sunday evening with a single antiphon.
Well, that's a good one too, though, Father.
Looking forward to getting back to the green time again. He could sing in exitu to.
You could do worse than Mode 7, though.
Oh, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Mode 7. I'm just saying that Newman himself was so keen on Peregrinus that even Mode 7 wasn't sufficient to compensate for it.
Well, and I think you're right. I mean, by the time people just don't understand the way that chant was sung and the corrupted melodies at that time. And by the time you're finished explaining that to them, it's already, 2 hours later, and now you can go back to Newman. So
yes, quite.
But no, there's no question about it. I mean, it actually is to his credit that he did not appreciate Gregorian chant at that time, based on the way that we know that it was sung, especially when you look at for example, the organ accompaniments of the corrupted melodies at that time.
Oh yes,
it's
very good point.
Very difficult to even imagine what that must have sounded like.
No, you're absolutely right. That's a very, very important point. Of course, people like Vincent Novello, who's one of the great early 19th century Catholic musicians, actually harmonized chant by changing the harmony under every note.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So that, of course, terribly slows things down.
Yeah, and you got those, also the ones that are basically mensural, where you have like a whole note and then a 16th note, and that's just the way it was done back then. But,
yes. Yes, no, it was certainly certainly a very different sort of experience. I think the whole kind of effect must have been rather glutinous. I should think, really. It certainly wouldn't flow along in the way that we have got used to. Not at all.
Yeah. So listen, I cannot thank you enough for the update, and it's great to speak to you again. It's great to hear your voice.
Thank you, and you too.
Let me leave you in peace for now, because I know it's getting late there, and actually I have to go take care of something here. It's only 10:50 a.m. here, so.
Oh my goodness me! Yes, of course Los Angeles is a very long way behind. Yes.
Absolutely, but again, it's so great to speak to you, and I thank you so much for the update. I'm just amazed that I seem to have called at the complete right time in terms of what you're about to release.
I know, and I think that's a wonderful providential thing, Jeff. I was certainly hoping that I would have got in contact with you before the launch was due anyway, but as it happened, your contacting me first seemed to me to be ideally providential. So thank you very much for doing so. It's good to be able to talk to you.